Elizabeth Bishop Full History Real Story. The night was sharp, and the wind outside clawed at the windows of a small New York apartment. Inside, the walls were yellowed by years of cigarette smoke, stacked high with books, letters, and loose sheets of poetry. At the center of it all sat Elizabeth Bishop, bent over her desk, her thin fingers spreading out handwritten drafts across the wooden surface. The words on those pages were her lifelines, sometimes burning like scars, sometimes soft and flowing like tears. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the only way I know how to stay alive." Childhood fractures. Elizabeth's story didn't begin in triumph. It began with loss. She was just 8 months old when her father died. Her mother, devastated, sank into mental illness so deep that she was institutionalized and never returned. Elizabeth grew up shuttled between relatives, first in Nova Scotia, then Massachusetts. A child without an anchor, she clung to books and solitude. Home was never a place. It was whatever corner she could sit in with paper and pencil. But loneliness carves deep lines. By adolescence, she felt like a ghost walking through other people's houses, always welcomed, never belonging. The poet emerges. At Vassar College, words began to take shape in her like storms. Friends noticed the quiet girl scribbling in notebooks, and soon, her verses found their way into print. They weren't loud or angry, but precise, like a scalpel cutting open the world. Yet even as her fame slowly rose, she lived with a secret ache, a struggle with alcohol, and the shadows of depression. Behind her gentle poems was a woman constantly at war with silence. Her poetry didn't shout, it observed. A filling station covered in oil and grime, a fish caught and let go, the geography of loss. Ordinary images that carried extraordinary weight. But Elizabeth herself, she remained an enigma. A woman watching the world like an exile, never quite stepping fully into it. Love and exile. In the 1950s, Elizabeth traveled to Brazil. She hadn't planned to stay, but fate works like tides. There she met Lota de Macedo Soares, a fiery Brazilian architect. Lota was everything Elizabeth wasn't: outspoken, confident, unafraid of the world. Their love was complicated, stormy, but it gave Elizabeth something she had never known, a sense of being chosen. Brazil became her second home, its landscapes breathing into her poetry, its colors staining her pages. But happiness is fragile. Lota's life spiraled into exhaustion and despair. In 1967, she took her own life. Elizabeth was left shattered, holding grief like an unpayable debt. Recognition and restlessness. In America, Elizabeth's poetry began to gain recognition. She won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award, the Neustadt International Prize. Yet, even at the peak of her career, she felt like an outsider to her own success. She taught at Harvard, where students admired her sharp eye and quiet discipline, but privately, she still drank heavily, often collapsing into nights of loneliness. Elizabeth once wrote, "The art of losing isn't hard to master." It became one of her most quoted lines, but to her, it wasn't just poetry, it was autobiography. She had lost her father, her mother, her stability, her great love. She lived in the spaces those losses left behind, making art out of absence. The final years. By the 1970s, Elizabeth's health was declining. The years of alcohol, the weight of sorrow, the restless moves between countries, it all caught up. Still, she wrote, meticulously and slowly. She never rushed her poems, each one was carved with patience, as though it might be her last. On October 6, 1979, Elizabeth Bishop died suddenly of a cerebral aneurysm in her Boston apartment. She was 68. At her desk were unfinished drafts, fragments of poems that would never be completed. Her life, like her verses, ended quietly. No spectacle, no grand finale, just silence. Legacy. And yet, silence was never the end. Today, Elizabeth Bishop is remembered as one of America's greatest poets, though she never wrote with grandeur or self-importance. Her poems taught readers that beauty exists in the overlooked, the broken, the small. She was a woman who lived between countries, between loves, between griefs, and out of those in-betweens, she gave the world words that endure. If her life had been a film, it wouldn't have been an epic of victories. It would have been a slow, haunting story of survival, love, and loss, lit by brief flashes of joy, and ending with the quiet power of a voice that refused to be extinguished. Because sometimes, the real history of a person isn't about glory. It's about persistence. And Elizabeth Bishop persisted through exile, heartbreak, and loneliness until her words belonged not just to her, but to the world.